I quite liked it.
Really?
Yeah.
Go on.
Where to start? No, I think that overall it was a very, well, now I don't know how to justify my feelings. No,
So you changed your mind.
Yeah, I hate it now.
It was a horrible episode.
This is absolutely horrendous.
I'm Tom Dickinson.
And I'm Louis Midas.
And this is the Cloister Room,
a podcast about Doctor Who and other things. I guess what it was, and I know we talked about this last week without it really being relevant to A Town Called Mercy, but we talked about how there wasn't really any modern-day Earth invasions on a global scale, so on and so forth. And I really liked that. I thought that was kind of refreshing. And also, I liked how it was done. I liked this sort of mystery about what these cubes were and, you know, how they got there and things like that. And this episode wasn't without its flaws. There were some minor nitpicks I had, but for overall, I thought it was an exciting story. The only thing that I really objected to was the ending felt a little sudden.
And perhaps also a little bit stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was very much torn on this episode because I think there's like half a dozen things about this episode that I absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
And the Earth invasion story is a big part of that because it's hugely nostalgic of the Russell T Davies era, which is, you know, that's what made me a Doctor Who fan.
Right.
So it was very good to see that return. But the ending of the episode, I just thought everything from the point they got onto the spaceship up till the closing credits was just really dumb.
Yeah, no, actually, I completely agree with that. I think that up to the point that they got on the spaceship, they knew pretty much absolutely nothing. It's almost as if they were two separate stories, I guess. Not really two separate stories, but sort of two separate stories, I guess. I don't know. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but the point is that there's this big mystery of what these cubes are, and it's building up like kind of the suspense and things like that, and then they get on the spaceship and it's like, oh, well, it's these guys. So, and then the Doctor does almost nothing, or it requires almost no effort on the part of the Doctor to solve the problem of the episode, which is that these cubes just murdered a bunch of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, what happens when he gets on the spaceship is he just listens to some exposition about, he's like, okay, this is who we are, and this is our really simple and kind of, you know, not all that interesting reason for wanting to kill everyone. Uh-huh. It's not justified very well, and the Doctor's, well, you know what? First of all, I've heard of you guys before, so that's something. Second of all, I don't think your reasons are very good. And then the guy disappears, and the Doctor's like, oh, it's a hologram. So he points his sonic screwdriver at a screen, says, all right, everything's fixed. And then comes down to Earth, and Kate Stewart says, my God, you are the most amazing man I've ever met. I mean, you know, fair enough, that's probably true, but it's not really justified in the context of what just happened.
Right. The thing is, she probably doesn't know. She probably doesn't know what went down. She probably thought, like, it came down to the wire, and, like, a bomb was gonna go off or something, and the Doctor, like, cut the blue wire or something in this heroic act of bravery, and it was, like, this genius part, because, like, how could he know to cut the blue wire or something? I'm sure that she imagined all this in her head, and so, of course, she thought that the Doctor was brilliant. I mean, if she'd actually known, she probably also would have been like, oh, well then.
I'm just gonna get all my problems with this episode out of the way first, and then move on to the stuff that I thought was really cool.
Okay.
That character, anyway, Kate Stewart, daughter of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, which is kind of neat. But she was pointless. I thought. I mean, I liked that. I kind of liked the character, but she didn't do much in the episode. She just, I mean, she served the role of any random scientist or military person who would just, you know, show up and say, "Oh, you're the Doctor. we've heard of you. Here's what's going on. We don't understand. And then the Doctor's like, well, I don't understand either. There's just not any reason for that character to be anything. I mean, it could just be that there was nothing interesting about the character at all, and they're like, well, we need something a little bit more interesting here, so let's just make her the daughter of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that there's nothing really tied to, I guess you could say, her legacy in the character. I mean, like, she's not really there at all helping the Doctor or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes her kind of a pointless character, although I don't really know how... I mean, I guess that it's kind of pointless, but I thought that it was still kind of cool. And also, I mean, I guess what I thought was most important about her was that she was leading UNIT in more of a sciencey kind of direction. And I thought that maybe that sort of helped. I mean, like, obviously you could just say, oh, UNIT put a bunch of these cubes in the lab and have been playing around with them. And that didn't really rely on the fact that there was some person who is relevant to the show's history who was the impetus to get that to happen. I guess you don't really need that. But still, I guess what I liked most about just her and UNIT was that UNIT was going in more of a sciencey direction.
I like that. And as I said, I do like the character. Mm-hmm. And I really do hope we see this character again, because mm-hmm. I thought she was great in that regard, but in no way did she play into any kind of conflict or drama or even comedy very much. I mean, she had a couple funny lines, but like, for instance, whenever the Doctor comes up against UNIT, there's usually someone in charge who, sort of becomes the Doctor's ally, but he's not completely on the best of terms with him, and they will often make a decision that causes tension between the Doctor and UNIT, and that sort of adds drama to the whole situation. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in those cases, that's when you get characters like the UNIT officers in the Centauran two-parter.
Right.
Or, even the Brigadier himself back in the classic series used to butt heads with the Doctor all the time. Mm-hmm. And that sort of adds something to the story. But I just don't think she really added much of anything, aside from, the vague sense that UNIT is changing.
Yeah, and I think that probably this wasn't the best story to showcase UNIT, I guess. I don't know if that should have been... I mean, I don't know what they could have done differently, because I feel like this story was really about... I don't know.
Well, I think it was mostly about Amy and Rory.
It was about Amy and Rory, I guess...
But it tried to be about other things also.
Well, I wouldn't even say it tried. I think that UNIT was kind of necessary for the story, and I don't think it wouldn't have worked nearly as well without UNIT. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
You mean just in the sense that if they weren't there, you'd be wondering where they were?
Yes, mostly.
Mm-hmm. That makes a certain amount of sense.
And I think that it's important that they address the issue, like, well, why don't we just round up all the cubes and, Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that, like, it's kind of nice to see that they want to do that, but they don't have the resources. And I feel like if UNIT was completely absent, I'd be like, well, why aren't they doing this? So I guess that in that sense, I mean, obviously there are probably numerous ways you could say that without involving UNIT, but I just feel like UNIT kind of worked in a very superficial sense, just that it was nice to see them, I guess. So I prefer that this episode has UNIT. I don't know how much I don't know if I would want UNIT to be more involved or not. I guess it would have been nice, but I feel like that may have harmed the Amy Rory element of this story.
This is something that I sort of immediately thought of as soon as the episode was done. I thought that it needed to be a two-parter.
Huh.
I thought that, I don't know, for some reason, Stephen Moffat said that they're not doing two-parters anymore, or that they wouldn't do two-parters just to do two-parters. They'd only do two-parters if they thought there were two distinct stages to this story. And I think there were two distinct stages to the story. There was the sort of building tension around the mystery of the cubes.
Right.
When they weren't doing anything. Mm-hmm. And then there's the part where, the cubes suddenly start doing stuff, and that becomes the alien invasion plot. And a major, like, the whole concept of it is the slow invasion.
Right.
So making it much slower would have been better, in my opinion.
It would have been rather appropriate. Yeah, actually, I agree with that. I think that could have really worked, and I think that I can almost see exactly where you would put the cliffhanger, even. I mean, that's how clear it is that this should have been a two-parter. So, yeah, I think that really would have benefited.
I don't really understand why they've suddenly decided not to do them anymore. I guess if they want to do, these big movies or whatever, then I guess that makes some sense. Like standalone movie thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this story probably would have been a lot stronger had it been a two-parter. In some sense, I really don't like two-parters. Like when I know that, oh man, this week's going to be a two-parter, there's always that kind of like disappointment. Which sounds weird, but that's something that's always happened for as long as I've been watching Doctor Who live, is that it always was a disappointment because I knew that I was only getting half a story. And I mean, I guess And that's really a dumb thing to say. I don't know why I feel that way. I just always do. But I mean, I would rather have a two-parter that is a strong story than a two-parter smushed into a one-parter that's a weaker story.
Yeah. Even just adding a couple of minutes to the story might have helped, because I think it was a little shorter than some of the others we've gotten.
Oh, was it? I wasn't really paying attention.
It was 41 minutes, and I mean, we've seen episodes that have been, closer to 45.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I think that really the climax was dumb. Yeah, with the doctor just being like, I thought you guys were myths, but I guess you're real, and I know exactly how to stop you.
Yeah, I feel like the doctor saying, you're Gallifreyan myths, is just some kind of attempt to, like, add something to that scene, because there's nothing going on in that scene.
Right.
It's just an enemy saying, we're doing this bad thing, here's why we're doing it. The doctor says, that's not a thing you should do. And then he stops them by waving a sonic screwdriver. But, like, they're just trying to sort of make it seem more impressive and exciting than it actually is, just by tying it into Gallifreyan legend.
Yeah, I think it was kind of sloppy, but for me that was not really... It's almost kind of like by the end of the episode, I wasn't really... Well, I was curious as to what these cubes were, but after we find out their point is to, I don't know, be, rat poison or whatever for the Earth, I kind of didn't really care so much about how the doctor stopped it. I mean, I guess I obviously still cared, but it wasn't as important to me, and I think that just like Amy, I think that what I got out of this episode more than anything was Amy and Rory's sort of reconciling these two lives that they have,
like the life where they like have jobs and friends and stuff, and the life where they stand behind the doctor saying, "What's that, doctor? What do you mean, doctor?" while he waves a sonic screwdriver at a screen. those two lives.
Yes, those two lives. Well, it's important. It's very important for the doctor to have that, because otherwise he'd just be speaking to himself.
Yeah.
When you put it like that, it doesn't sound as big a deal.
Yeah, well, I thought that was a pretty big problem with this episode as well, because it's focused on, Amy and Rory, and then it tries to, at the end, it tries to say, them being with the doctor is this worthwhile thing that is truly great because the power of three, yada, yada, yada.
I hated that line.
Me too. I hated it on its own terms because it's super corny, but I also hated it because they had served no role in resolving that.
That's true. I mostly just hated it because it was corny as hell. I hated that line so much. See, I thought that the episode was mostly okay right up until they got that line out. And
that's when we learned what cubed really meant. The power of three.
God, Amy, just shut up. Just shut up, Amy. No, but...
Amy's a writer. Amy's a journalist.
No wonder print newspaper is going down the toilet.
Yeah.
No, it's no, why would you say that? It's just so dumb. It sounds like something it sounds like something that you'd say, like, if you had just been, like, bullied, and, like, you're trying to think of a comeback to make it all okay, to make the bully look really dumb, and this is the best you can come up with in the moment. And it's just painful to listen to. And yeah, I guess it is even compounded by the fact that Amy and Rory did absolutely nothing to solve the issue.
Almost everything having to do with Amy and Rory prior to them being on the spaceship was just so fantastic in this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the role they played and everything that they did and the way that it sort of showed that they were balancing their lives, their normal, go to work everyday lives with this doctor's crazy adventure. I liked that.
I especially like the scene with the doctor and Amy, the one where they're sitting outside at night.
Yeah.
And the doctor's talking about the fact that he thinks that they're going to want to stop traveling with him soon.
Yeah, I loved that scene. I thought that was fantastic. It was sort of sentimental, but it wasn't like overly so. And I just thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like you're the first face this face saw. I thought that was just, it reminded you of, the start of Series 5, which of course was a fantastic episode in itself. And I don't know, that gave me like a really big warm fuzzy feeling.
I feel, though, like, so much stuff in this episode indicates that it's probably time for them to leave. Mm-hmm. I think leaving and parting ways with the doctor is probably the right decision for them. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, I mean, they go off with him. They just switch on a dime.
That's true.
And I think whether that's okay with me or not kind of depends on what happens next week.
Right. It's like this is kind of setting us up for, maybe they shouldn't be with the Doctor, or maybe it's time that they live their own lives, but now we're going to go off and have more adventures. That was like a question that was posed, and I feel like that this is setting us up for that question to be answered in the next episode. But there were other bits that I really liked. I loved when Brian asked the Doctor what happened to the people who travel with him.
Yeah.
I thought that was really powerful. And actually, it's funny because I've been rewatching the early seasons of Fringe, and I felt like when the Doctor says that, like, well, not very often, but some died, I felt like that's almost something that Walter Bishop would say. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, something about that scene just really struck me as being incredibly powerful. And I really, really liked that.
Matt Smith kind of reminds me of John Noble sometimes.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
Yeah, well, especially with the food. Mm-hmm. Things like that, yeah. Actually, one of the things that I feel like, this has reaffirmed my fear about Amy and Rory. I feel like this line is going to become terribly ironic and tragic. With Brian telling the Doctor, just bring them back safe. I just feel like, oh God, why'd you have to say that, Brian?
Yeah.
He's ruined everything.
It's interesting because for a moment I wondered, I'd sort of brought this up before, but whether it's possible that in Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, I mean, the Doctor and Amy have a conversation, just a brief exchange, where the potential that Amy could die is mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then there's this weird look on the Doctor's face. So I was wondering whether, that might be chronologically after the events in next week's episode.
Ooh.
But that doesn't really make sense now that I think of it, because he first meets Brian in that episode.
True.
And then in this episode, from the Doctor's perspective, seems to be after that.
That's true.
But in any case, I wonder whether we're going to see Brian again next week.
That's interesting.
Because what's sort of hanging over it now is his accountability, the Doctor's accountability to Brian in a way that he wasn't always accountable to anyone in terms of Amy and Rory. In the Russell T Davies era, there was always the companion's family.
Right.
There was always, bring her back safe, Doctor.
Yeah.
Now there is for Amy and Rory.
Yeah, because I feel like if I would say that the Moffat era has been missing one thing, it's that sort of connection, that sort of like family connection to add to, I guess, the peril of, the Doctor's companions and bringing them back safe and things like that.
I don't know that it's been missing that. I think there was a sort of deliberate choice not to do that.
See, well, I don't know if I really like that then. I don't know. I think that I preferred that.
Because, I mean, that's something that was very much unique to the Russell T Davies era and wasn't part of the classic series. And I feel like in the Moffat era so far, they very slowly built that sense of family into their travels with the Doctor. Where instead of Amy and Rory having... I mean, obviously they have parents. I mean, we met Amy's parents very briefly.
Right.
But haven't seen them since. Obviously they exist, but the sense of family that's important to the story was always, Amy and Rory and the Doctor and River. But they sort of have shifted away from that a bit, I guess.
I understand that. I guess I just really don't like it as much. And I realize that was the way it was in the classic series, but I just... Yeah. I don't know.
And that's completely understandable. I'm not sure how I feel about it, and I don't think I'll know for sure until after we've seen the end of the story.
That's true. I don't know if that's really gonna... And obviously it's almost impossible to say, but I don't know if that'll really change with the new companion either. I feel like... I mean, obviously we know absolutely nothing about the new companion, so it's stupid for me to even say it, and I feel like I probably shouldn't say it, but I feel like this is probably... I actually don't know.
Do you think that A Town Called Mercy takes place during this episode?
You're saying that during this episode, the Doctor, Amy, and Rory take a break from all the cube stuff?
Well, during the 7 weeks that they're gone.
Right.
Because they meet Henry VIII.
Right.
And it is said in A Town Called Mercy that, I think immediately prior to that, they had just left Henry VIII.
Right, because, Rory left his charger.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do. I didn't, but now I do. No, I forgot about that. Oh, man.
It's kind of weird to think, though, that there's a sort of story within that episode about, what happens when the Doctor is too long without companions, and it's kind of weird to embed... It's easy to embed the events of that story within the events of this, but it's hard to embed the themes of that story within the themes of this.
Whoa.
It kind of seems weird.
Yeah.
When you think of that.
My mind is blown. But yeah, no, that's true. It's weird because the events of A Town Called Mercy sort of changed the Doctor's outlook, I think, and sort of snapped him back to being the hero we know and love. I guess. It's funny because I guess I wasn't really looking for it, but you don't visibly see that transformation happen over the course of this episode.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything one way or the other that suggests that transformation is or isn't happening.
True.
That particular thing is sort of irrelevant to the beginning of this episode. I mean, the beginning of this episode could very well have a doctor who is willing to...
That's true.
...to kill a man.
Right. He's never really confronted with that choice.
Not in the opening,
right.
10 minutes of this episode.
Right. Yeah, that could very well be the case. There's definitely wiggle room in there for that. Huh. Yeah, wow. My mind is blown.
Or it could just be that, the reign of Henry VIII is just a place that they visit more than once. That could also be the case.
Could be. They might really like... Maybe the Henry VIII is a really fun guy.
Maybe they go back to get the charger.
That could be. What is implied in this episode is that the Pons... Actually, it's directly stated in this episode that the Pons go missing for months on end. And I thought that it's weird because in A Town Called Mercy, they say that, our friends are noticing we're aging faster than them, or whatever. This is kind of like a have cake, eat it too sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I was under the impression that they were aging significantly faster. But, I mean, like, let's say that they go missing for months on end and it's actually been like a year. Like, I mean, I guess that's still, like...
That could be the case. I mean, we're told in this episode that from Amy and Rory's perspective, it's been 10 years. We're not told it's been 10 years since what?
That's true.
Because, in one sense, are we talking about since the beginning of the 11th hour? Well, not the beginning, when she's a child. I mean, from the middle portion of the 11th hour, or are we talking about since the end portion of the 11th hour? Or are we talking about since they left after the wedding? Because, that's in a timeline where they remember multiple timelines, one where they traveled with the Doctor and one where they didn't travel with the Doctor. Yeah. Also, Rory was a plastic dude for thousands of years. So it's clearly been more than 10 in that sense, but also he only half remembers that, kind of.
True.
So, I mean, saying it's been 10 years, that's kind of a complicated thing to say.
Well, yeah, like, how did they calculate that? Yeah, I don't really, wow, that's just, wow.
Plus, another year and 7 weeks for them passes during the course of this episode.
True.
Yeah, she says it's been 10 years from their perspective, not from the perspective of the world itself.
Right.
We don't really get any hint of what that timeline is like.
Yeah, that doesn't help me out at all. I guess it's weird to me that they're traveling in time. I mean, unless the Doctor just does not care to drop Amy and Rory back off where he left them. Maybe the Doctor's just really inconsiderate like that. He's like, this is approximately when you guys left. And so this is it just seems weird to me that either the Doctor is content in plucking them out of time, and the time that passes when they're traveling and the time that elapses on Earth is 1-to-1. Like, I mean, I guess that the Doctor might want to do that just to be like, maybe it's just better in terms of Amy and Rory's, I don't know, by like internal clocks or whatever, that they feel the passage of time has happened.
Well, just psychologically.
Right. And also, I guess, I don't know.
This was all very easy in the Russell T Davies era.
Right.
Because Rose took place in 2005, which is when it aired.
Right.
Then he takes her back 1 year later, Aliens of London.
Right.
And then every subsequent instance in the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who basically takes place 1 year after the present day.
Right.
Because of that.
Right. It seemed like the passage of time on Earth to the passage of time traveling kind of was 1-to-1, where, I don't know, like a companion would be gone for a length of time, and they'd come back and that same length of time had passed on Earth, I guess.
Well, we don't really know that.
I guess not. But I mean, it helps, it helps in terms of cell phone usage, because like people like Martha will make phone calls back to contemporary Earth.
But Rose in End of the World calls her mother.
Right.
And it appears that she calls her mother on the day before Rose and the Doctor left, or the day before her work blew up, because she calls her mother and they're discussing the lottery pool, which is an event that's seen in Rose.
Oh. Huh. That's weird.
Unless it's a different lottery pool, but I mean, you'd think that Rose's mother would be like, well, where the hell are you? You've been gone for months.
Huh, that's true. That's weird because I didn't actually... Wow, it's been so long since I've seen that, but I didn't really pick up on that. Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all right. I guess I have no idea. Well then, I don't know. God, Tom, why you gotta ruin everything?
I don't know. I just gotta.
But all right, fine. But I think that
I don't know. Do we want to try and think this logically and sort of figure out whether 10 years makes sense or not? I mean, because let's say Series 5 is about a year in Amy's personal timeline, then between Series 5 and Series 6, we have no idea.
No.
Let's just not pretend we have any idea.
Yeah, that's foolish of us.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that because A Christmas Carol, they're seen to be on their honeymoon on some spaceship. We're assuming that probably took some time, and it ended with them nearly crashing on a planet, and then they go to a honeymoon.
True.
Which is also carnivorous. Yeah, I don't know. It's like 10 years.
10 years or 1,010 years, depending on whether you count the time that Rory was plastic and Amy was trapped inside the
That's
Pandora.
true. I feel like, I don't know. I can't tell if Amy and Rory are like genius mathematicians or they're just completely fudging this number.
Like the Doctor.
Yes, exactly like the Doctor.
So another thing that I really, really liked about this episode was just the whole concept of the cubes.
I like that too.
I thought that was a really great idea in that it was an alien invasion that just isn't anything. It's just like the most nondescript possible thing that could happen. Like in the Russell T Davies era, you had satellite navigators, you had various different like the adipose, various different like things that you would encounter in everyday life that turned out to be alien invasions. But in this case, it was just random bits of thing, like just nothing. I like that. That was cool.
I really liked that. Although I was a little unclear. Did these cubes fall from the sky? Because that sounded like that's what happened. But then
I think we see them materialize.
Well, that's the thing.
We see one materialize in their bedroom.
Right, we do. And that was confusing to me because the whole point was that, you put these curious-looking little things on the ground. Humans, being those incorrigible, curious, monkeys that they are going to pluck them up and take them back to their houses. But why couldn't you just kind of, like, zap them into people's houses?
And I think they did as well.
Well, yeah, but this isn't... Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it didn't really bother me that much, but I mean, it was just kind of weird.
It's a very kind of absurdist invasion, which I just really enjoyed.
Yeah, that's true.
Just like a complete non sequitur.
Yeah.
They're just some cubes.
Yeah, and I liked some mention that the cubes have Twitter accounts and people have done, YouTube videos or whatever with the cubes.
And once again, we see that the Doctor does not approve of Twitter.
Yeah.
I think he's just angry about the new Twitter API 1.1. I'm not happy about that either.
Well, that's fair.
Because, I mean, that shuts down the TARDIS's own third-party Twitter client.
So another thing that I guess kind of harkened back to the Russell T Davies era and just made me feel all really good inside and happy was they played Slade.
Oh, yeah.
That made me just so happy.
Yeah, that was cool. I was on the lookout for Trinity Wells, the newsreader who was constantly used on Doctor Who, Torchwood, and Sarah Jane Adventures, but she didn't show up.
Yeah. This is sad.
But yeah, that was obviously a very deliberate nod.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is pretty nice.
Yeah. And I mean, that's so perfectly... That's almost like Pavlovian. I hear that song and I know that it's a Doctor Who Christmas.
Yeah, it's just so much of that kind of thing in this episode where the episode is very aware that this is a kind of story that it used to do and that I mean, they don't do anymore and now we're doing it. I really like that because I still love Doctor Who and I don't think it's gone downhill or anything, but I really just that was the era in which Doctor Who became my favorite show. So
yeah, mine as well. In a lot of ways, it really was like a nod, and it was almost like a nostalgia bomb back to that sort of era. And I really just I liked it on those terms more than almost anything else.
The show also has done like nostalgia bombs for classic series stuff all the time. So I mean, why not nostalgia bomb for this thing that was only a few years ago?
Yeah,
because that's an important part of Doctor Who history as well.
It most certainly is. And I really, really, really like that. I almost want to say that this was this was perhaps 98% of the reason I really liked this episode, was just that it was really hearkening back to that era, that brief era that happened, 7 years ago.
Yeah. I think that and a lot of the Amy and Rory stuff, and Brian. I love Brian. Brian was so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see more of him. Yeah, he's really...
I don't think we will, though.
Probably not.
I mean, I don't think we'll see much more of him.
Right. There'd almost be no reason. But yeah, I do really like him.
Chris Chibnall, the writer of this episode, is a name that I have heard bandied about as possibly Moffat's successor.
Really? Now,
this is just fan speculation, because during the Russell T Davies era, at a certain point it became obvious that when Russell stopped, Moffat was the obvious choice that they would pick. Whether he would agree to do it, I mean, who knew? And it turns out he did. But Moffat was sort of the clear next in line. There really isn't a single clear next in line once Moffat decides he doesn't want to run the show anymore. So Chris Chibnall has previous show running experience, and he's a big Doctor Who person as well. So I think that's what gets his name mentioned in that context.
That's interesting, because I don't really... When you talk about successors to Russell T Davies, it was during that era. I was always thinking to myself, "Oh man, this week's a Stephen Moffat episode." Yeah. So in that context, yeah, it was like, of course, you'd want Stephen Moffat to be the next showrunner. But yeah, I would agree. I don't really have that anymore. I don't really think like, "Oh man, this week is a Chris Chibnall story." Yeah, that's kind of gone. Although, something that I'd heard, or maybe we talked about this.
Mark Gatiss?
Yeah, him.
He's another name that I hear a lot of when people bring this up. Another one is Toby Whithouse, who made Being Human. I mean, the names that tend to get brought up are names that are A, repeat Doctor Who writers, and B, have previous experience running their own show.
True. Yeah, and I mean, that's fair. I feel like, though, like, the next showrunner of Doctor Who should be someone who... It feels dumb to say this, but it feels like... I feel like I want to say, like, it's someone who really loves Doctor Who. I mean, but, like, saying that is really kind of dumb, because I think that, like, probably all the writers really love Doctor Who. Or otherwise they wouldn't be writing it.
That's probably true.
But I feel like Mark Gatiss fits that bill.
Yeah, I feel like... there are people who really love Doctor Who, and there are people who you just feel like writing Doctor Who is their destiny.
Right.
Mark Gatiss is probably the one that most fits that bill that's currently writing for the show. Mm-hmm. I feel like, to an extent, that also applies to Paul Cornell.
Oh, yeah.
Who hasn't written for the show in a while. And I also kind of feel that way about Rob Shearman, who only ever wrote one episode, which was Dalek. But everything else I know about Rob Shearman outside stuff I've read that he's written, both fiction and nonfiction. I mean, people who have Doctor Who encoded in their DNA.
Right.
That's kind of who you think of as people who would want to run Doctor Who. And I don't actually know all that much about Chris Chibnall.
Right.
And whether that's the case for him.
True.
Maybe it is.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think that, yeah. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to say that it would be wrong to have Chris Chibnall be showrunner. I mean, like you, I know almost nothing about him. So, yeah, it could very well be that he would be a very good natural choice. But I guess just in my mind, I feel like, especially with Mark Gatiss being co-runner of Sherlock with Stephen Moffat, I feel like that almost makes him more of a natural choice, and I don't know why that is, but yeah.
Yeah, but then there's Chris Chibnall got 2 episodes. Why did he get 2? And we don't know how many episodes Mark Gatiss is getting. I don't think we know. I know he's getting at least 1 in the back half of the series, but not all of the writers for the back half of this series have been confirmed, as far as I'm aware. Ooh. So maybe he'll get 3.
Ooh. Well then he would be the natural choice. That proves it. That makes him the alpha male. But actually, it's funny because another person who I know it'll never happen, and it sounds ridiculous even saying, but Neil Gaiman.
Well, yeah, he's got another episode coming up.
Oh, does he?
It was just announced. He won the Hugo for his episode last year, and in his acceptance speech, he announced that he'd been asked to write another episode, and he accepted it, and he was currently working on it. So it's probably not until Series 8.
Right.
My guess is, but I think he's too busy and doesn't live in the UK.
Right. Those are pretty big stumbling blocks. But yeah, it's just kind of like my secret fantasy is that he becomes showrunner. I don't know.
And now everyone knows.
My secret's out. Cat's out of the bag. I would just love... I mean, this is, in this crazy, made-up Lewis's imagination universe, I'd like to see Neil Gaiman be showrunner. But I don't even really know if that holds water, because we've only ever seen one episode of his, and I'm sure that he... in my mind, I feel like this is probably an idea that he's had forever.
Yeah.
The Doctor's Wife, which is, probably what makes it so good. And is probably the reason why it's one of my favorite episodes ever, if not the favorite episode of mine.
I think The Girl Who Waited is a better episode in that series.
The Girl Who Waited?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I think The Girl Who Waited is my favorite episode of that series.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess you did say that,
Didn't we talk about this?
We did. I'm remembering this now. It's been a while. I still have to go with The Doctor's Wife.
I was talking to I think I was talking about this with Dave, who is a listener of our podcast. His name is David Byrne. He goes by The Walrus Was Dave on the internet.
Oh, yes.
And he mentioned to me, I think this was Dave. He mentioned to me that he had listened to our podcast, and he just found it the most hilarious thing in the world that I was talking shit about the corridors used in that episode, and that how much they dragged that episode down for me.
Yeah, well, I think he was right.
They didn't actually drag it down that much. I mean, I do think that those are really bad corridors, and I wanted much better.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think it's fair that you want things to be better, and really, don't we all?
I think most of us do.
Yeah. Some people want things worse.
Probably. Well, but yeah, anyhow, I don't think that that Neil Gaiman is next in line to run Doctor Who. I think I do think that's someone who I would love to see more episodes from, and I'm glad that we're getting at least one.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the thing, is like in my mind that's sort of like, that is really just a dream of mine. But I mean, I have no reason to think that could ever happen actually, but if that were ever to happen, it would be I would genuinely be like, my God, my dream came true.
Well, it's an easy comparison to make, because when Russell T Davies was running the show, Moffat was, as we sort of said, the buzziest writer on the show. And now that Moffat's running the show, I think Gaiman is easily the buzziest writer. Most notably with him has it been the case that anticipation has built up around the writer of an episode.
Yeah, and I mean, to some extent, that's kind of... I would think that that is at least in part due to his renown as a fiction writer. But that doesn't at all subtract from the fact that he's a very good writer.
And
general.
a comic writer.
Yes.
In any case, based on this episode and on Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, I would probably be quite interested to see Chris Chibnall's take on Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. Obviously, I was not wild about Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, but, there have been Stephen Moffat episodes that I've not been wild about, so... Actually, have there been? I'm sure that there have.
I know in my case there have been.
Like, for example?
I mean, there were elements of the Wedding of River Song that I think we both kind of disliked.
Yeah.
Even though it was an episode that overall we liked.
True.
I'm sure there are more.
I mean...
Same thing with Good Man Goes to War. Elements that I like and elements that I don't like.
That's true.
I need to look at a list of Stephen Moffat episodes now.
That's true.
Just to...
Yeah, actually, I almost want to say Beast Below, but I actually really liked Beast Below. But I feel like that almost might be in part from just it being the second Matt Smith story we ever saw. And it was still all kind of whimsical and fun. And I feel like that carried the episode, even if it wasn't a very interesting plot.
Yeah, I was not crazy about Day of the Moon.
Yeah.
You may recall. I think you liked it a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I recall that.
I was a little bit meh about The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. I enjoyed it, but I don't think it was, a standout episode.
Right. I seem to recall liking The Doctor, Wizard, and the Wardrobe. I realize it's only been, it's been about 9 months, so. But in any case, yeah, sure. I mean, Chris Chibnall could be a good writer.
He could be.
A good showrunner, that is. Yeah, I think that it wouldn't... I mean, I feel like... I hate passing judgment on, someone's potential for a job they've never had before. So I don't want to say, no, Chris Chibnall would be terrible. I feel like in order to judge that, we should see him in action. No, I'll leave that open. I'll say that I could get behind that. But I mean, how reasonable is it even that this is going to happen? I mean, I know that we've possibly said this on this podcast, that Stephen Moffat and Matt Smith might leave after the 50th anniversary. I mean, beyond, I guess, wild speculation, is there any grounds to that?
No, I don't think there's any grounds to that at all. I think The most recent word we've heard on the topic was in a recent issue of Doctor Who magazine, in which Matt Smith said that Moffat had been pitching him ideas for Series 8, which, assuming that Series 8 means after the 50th anniversary,
right,
then what that means is Moffat is presumably returning because he has ideas to pitch
right.
to Matt, and Matt Smith is, at the very least, considering returning.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I know that we've said this multiple times, and I'd just like to take this time to reaffirm it. I would be happy watching Matt Smith forever.
I would be happy watching Matt Smith forever, but I am beginning to yearn for a fresher take on the writing.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that at some point, the Doctor just needs to regenerate just to keep the show fresh. But I think that, for me, I agree, I yearn in some sense. But I think that getting a new companion shall suffice.
For the writing?
Yeah.
It could. We'll see. But I think in this day and age, the head writer dominates what Doctor Who is so much that I think by the end of the Russell T Davies era, I was ready for Stephen Moffat.
Right.
And I think even Moffat is now getting a little bit stale for me.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And it could be that, you know, the fresh character means a fresh take on the series, and that could be a good thing.
Well, in some sense, I have to wonder how much we're seeing the Doctor's world through Amy and Rory's eyes. Like, if what we're seeing is sort of through the lens of their perspective, then I would say that getting a new companion could change that perspective entirely, and with it, the tone of the show. I don't know if that would be Moffat's intention at all, but I don't know. I mean, insofar as Amy and Rory are meant to be the audience surrogate, I think that could easily be the case.
Yeah, and also just in general, I would like to see new writers.
Yeah.
I feel like they rely very heavily on the same repeat writers, many of whom are very good, but it would be fun to get new ones, and I think that there's at least one new writer in the second half of this series, but the first half has just been 5 episodes from 3 established writers.
True. Yeah, I suppose that if anything, I'm more attached to Matt Smith than I am to Stephen Moffat in terms of what I like about things as they currently are. Yeah, I guess I'd be fine with Stephen Moffat giving the role of showrunner to someone else. I don't know if I would be okay with Stephen Moffat no longer writing Doctor Who. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's ever been... Obviously, since the show's been revived, we've only had showrunner change hands, once. But I mean, I almost feel like, yeah, obviously we haven't seen Russell T Davies write an episode of Doctor Who since he left, although obviously he's been doing other things.
He did write the Sarah Jane Adventures featuring the 11th Doctor.
That's true. He didn't really have to write Doctor Who in order to write Doctor Who. I don't know if I'd be okay with Stephen Moffat never writing Doctor Who again. I think he's a good writer. I think he's a fun writer, and I think his ideas are interesting. And I don't know if I'd be able to let him go entirely.
Yeah, it's not that I'm saying, Moffat must go or anything like that.
Right.
I'm not saying it's time for Moffat to leave. I'm saying I would be very interested to see someone else's take on it. Mm-hmm. That's more what I'm saying.
And that is something I agree with. I guess I had it in my head that by giving up the title of showrunner, he would be basically saying goodbye to the show.
And maybe he would.
Right. That's entirely possible. I don't know how these things would work. Obviously, once again, because it's only happened once, so it's not like this is set in stone. Unless it is, I don't know. Kind of like the term limit for presidents or something. Once you're done showrunner, you're not allowed to write Doctor Who anymore. I don't know. But yeah, no, I am completely on board with a fresh take on Doctor Who.
But it might not happen for quite a while.
It might not.
So next week looks, I don't know how next week looks.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm keeping an open mind.
The trailer didn't give me a very strong sense of it, except for the fact that it looks like they're concentrating more on the actual premise of the angels as established in Blink rather than having them snap necks.
Right. Which is cool. Yeah, the whole snapping necks thing didn't really sit entirely well with me. Yeah, I don't know. This is getting off topic, and we could probably discuss this next week. But I was never really clear on why being quantum locked just meant looking. Shouldn't it mean observing? And when you're being touched by an angel, aren't you observing the angel? And I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway. But that's something we can talk about next week when it is perhaps explored. But probably not.
Probably not in any level of detail.
Right.